It is my great pleasure to introduce you to David Noakes, a great expert on the European Union and its history, and the founder of a company that manufactured GC-MAF, a product naturally occurring within the human body and a cure for cancer.
Well, let's start at the beginning. The European Union was founded by none other than Hermann Göring, a member of the Nazi Party. He made a speech on the 22nd of June 1940 establishing the European Union. And then in 1942, at Berlin University, all the major reports about the European Union were written. So everything from the common agricultural policy, the common monetary policy, the common disastrous fishing policy, the common agricultural policy, they were all written at Berlin University in 1942. It's almost impossible to change anything in the European Union, and they have not changed. When David Cameron was going to the European Union asking for changes before the referendum in 2016, he foolishly expected changes and obviously did not get any. We knew he wouldn't. In 1943, there was the first summit of the European Union, which of course was called the European Economic Community, Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft. In 1944, there was a meeting of the German High Command in the Rothaus in Strasbourg, also called the Maison Rouge. Some of the more enlightened members of the Nazi Party, who thought that it's just possible that Hitler might lose the war, were planning for the future, and they decided to make the European Union the vehicle for German ambitions after the war, and it has done that job superbly. And they delegated to the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst Intelligence Department the job of recruiting people and shepherding the EU through the future. Having lost the war, no one wanted Nazism. You couldn't sell Nazism to anyone. So the European Economic Community had a Nazi label attached to it, and it wasn't going anywhere. So they made about the only major change that has ever happened to the European Economic Community, which is the EU. They turned it from a Nazi basis to a communist basis. And that's not such a big change, because who were the Nazis? Everyone forgets. Nazi stands for National Socialist Party. The European Union wanted to deceive people, and they brought in two masters of deception, Monet and Salter, two men who had spoken vaguely in the 1930s about a United States of Europe. And by making it seem as though these guys invented the European Union, they hid the Nazi roots of the EU. We, unfortunately, joined the European Union in 1973, and it was obvious to us back in 1970 when Edward Heath was going to take us in. It was obvious that Britain was going to be corrupted. The European Union is an exact copy of the Soviet system. Of course, in England we have the treason laws, and if you attack our sovereignty, you will, or should, get done by the treason laws. And the last person this happened to was William the Joyce. William Joyce was known as Lord Haw-Haw, and he was hung on Ewing, Wandsworth Prison, in 1946 for treason. His way of sabotaging British democracy was just to talk on the radio. That's all he did. The Queen and her ministers have signed 6 EU treaties which totally abolish our sovereignty, and they should also have hung by the neck until dead. Tony Blair was sufficiently worried about it, because he signed 2 EU treaties, that he got the Queen to commute the sentence for treason to life imprisonment. But all the people who signed EU treaties up to that point, including Tony Blair, still get the punishment that was due at the time they signed the treaties. And Tony Blair signed one treaty before the Crime and Disorder Act, so he should also hang by the neck until dead. What's changed in Britain? Well, firstly, we have 3,000 laws, EU laws on our statute books. In the Magna Carta, it says that no potentate or power shall ever have its laws running their writ in England. That's part of the British Constitution. These 3,000 EU laws are stunningly corruptive. The Crown Prosecution Service and our courts have changed beyond all recognition, as we knew they would. So the Crown Prosecution Service used to support the man on the street against the big corporations and government. Now, in the fashion of a dictatorship, the Crown Prosecution Service supports the big corporations and the government against the man on the street. Hundreds of people get taken across the Channel under European arrest warrants every year. Now, the European arrest warrant is illegal under English law because it specifically says that the French or the Europeans do not have to produce any evidence. Well, it's illegal under habeas corpus and the Magna Carta to arrest without evidence. And for that reason, the European arrest warrant should never have been agreed to by our MPs because it is totally illegal under British law. We have common law, Magna Carta. Europe does not have any of that. Linda Thayer is in Fleury Mérogis prison. It was built for 2,855 people, contains 4,500, under the worst prison conditions in Europe. And that can apply to any one of you. We got done under 3 pieces of European law. We couldn't have been done under common law and the British Constitution because you have to show harm or damage. And GCMF does no harm, creates no damage. But the MHRA licenses 12 drugs that kill. Avandia killed 83,000. That's GlaxoSmithKline, an English company. And they got a $3 billion fine for fraud because they knew Avandia killed and they hid it from the people and the regulators. And this is normal. More than a dozen drugs kill, and the MHRA has never prosecuted them. But they prosecuted us because we are a threat to the profits of chemotherapy with GCMF. And GCMF will cure 75% of cancers. We will save the lives of 75% of terminal stage 4s with GCMF. And they don't want that. So this is a dictatorship that kills. It is the European Union and its laws that have killed 2 million English people and forced them to die unnecessarily of cancer. The second piece of law is Proceeds of Crime Act 2003. European law. The courts, the judge, the prosecutor get half of all the proceeds they steal off a defendant. We've been done for that. Our bank accounts have already been closed. Just remember, your bank account under the European Union can be closed by any bureaucrat. You do not need a court. You will lose your bank account and they can take your house away. This is the EU dictatorship. What they do is the police find a couple worth more than $1 million. They arrest the husband and wife and say, we will let the wife go free if you plead guilty to an offence that you did not commit. The man gets 4 to 7 years in prison. They close his bank accounts, seize his house, and when he gets out of prison 4 to 7 years later, he has nothing. The judge, the prosecutor, and the police keep 50% of the proceeds, usually more than that. This is the European dictatorship. So the medicines laws kill, The Proceeds of Crime Act 2003 turns the courts and the judges and the prosecutors and the police into criminals. And the European arrest warrant is completely illegal. Now, under corpus juris, the government is above the law. And there's no better explanation of this than the fact that over 2,000 prisoners have died in custody in police cells since 1992. And the police cannot be prosecuted for killing. The government cannot be prosecuted for its actions, cannot be prosecuted for killing you. I just can't understand how Remainers don't bother to question what's going on. Don't do internet searches. Don't look at history. This only happens in a dictatorship. And it is stunning that 16 million people in England voted for the dictatorship. 17.4 million voted against. It's just stunning that 16 million people can vote for a dictatorship. Now, there is no democratic checks and balances in the leadership of the EU. To become the new dictator in Europe, and there will be one because he can, you don't have to get any votes at all. The European Defence Union has been signed surreptitiously by Theresa May. She signed a lot of EU treaties behind our backs over the last 3 years. She was a saboteur. She is a Remainer. She had no intention of taking Britain out of the European Union. So the European Defence Union, which we are now committed to, hands over, we knew this was going to happen right from the beginning in 1970, hands over our Army, Navy, Air Force, atomic weapons, MI5, MI6 to the European Union. It is just a part of our total erosion of sovereignty. Our sovereignty will be totally cancelled under the European Union. Lord James of Blackheath brought this up in the House of Lords about the European Defence Union and Theresa May's signature, and he was threatened for making it public. So the aims of the European Union have always been military. We knew we were going to be losing our Army, Navy and Air Force back in 1970. Van Mayen is the German Defence Minister. She is military too. Under the European Union, conscription can happen. Your children, if they're aged 20 or over, can be forced to serve in the European Army. The majority of parliamentarians are Remainers. This is why Parliament is in such utter chaos. For 3 years now, the Remainers in Parliament have been trying to frustrate the Leave vote. They've been trying to frustrate Article 50. Of course, the parliamentarians don't represent us. Under the British Constitution, a parliamentarian, an MP, can only reflect the wishes of his constituents. MPs couldn't care less about the wishes of their constituents. There are a lot of people in the courts, in the Crown Prosecution Service, in Parliament, who are actively building the EU dictatorship, who know it's a dictatorship and want it to take over. How can people think like that? But an awful lot do. The European Union is proud to be the beast of revelation. They build this unfinished building in Strasbourg, which is supposed to be a representation of the Tower of Babel. The 12 stars and the blue flag of the European Union come from the Queen of Heaven, a demonic figure banned by God in Jeremiah 7. These guys are not on the good side. The European Union is truly evil. We want to get out of it as quickly as we can.
Please visit the website to find out more about our other presenters, since this is a unique opportunity to hear some of the best speakers on the circuit. and come away also with new perspectives and possibly also new friends, because this will be a gathering of like-minded people, people who all share an avid interest in history and in the past. So we do hope that you will be able to join us.